Welcome to the M&A show starring Maxine Griffin and Alyssa Kraft.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Maxine and welcome to the M&A show.
Today we will be talking about the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico.
That's right, and we have a very special guest to talk about this and how it affects our lives.
Okay, let's get started. Here she is, Lindsay Addison. She went to FGCU, Stetson 2, and she studied birds and biology. She is a biologist and works at Rookery Bay.
Here's
our interview.
Lindsay Addison. Hi Lindsay, thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome.
So I have a couple questions to ask you. My first one is, how do you think the oil will affect the sea turtles?
Well, oil is a toxin, so obviously when you're dealing with an animal like a sea turtle, anything that's toxic would be harmful to the sea turtle. Adult sea turtles could get sick or even die because of it, and often young animals are more susceptible to the effects of a toxin. So often young animals are affected more severely by something like oil or some other pollutant in the environment. So of particular concern would be the hatchlings.
Thank you. And my second one is, how do you think you or other biologists that study sea turtles can help save the sea turtles?
Well, as I was saying, with the hatchlings being possibly more susceptible to a toxin like oil in their environment, it is the sea turtle nesting season. So right now, loggerhead sea turtles and other species of sea turtles are nesting on the beaches along Florida's Gulf Coast. And what may end up happening as a result of this oil spill, if it's determined that too much oil is too near to Florida's coast, is that the sea turtles who are right now eggs under the sand on the beaches, when they hatch in about 60 days, will not be allowed to just crawl into the water like they would normally do. But scientists might have to actually prevent them from going into the water, put a little cage around their nests, and when they hatch and come out, transport them someplace where there isn't oil and release them there instead. So that's one thing that might end up being a step that scientists take to help protect hatchling sea turtles because of the oil spill.
All right, and do you think that BP is doing the right thing to drill this well into the seafloor, and do you think that it's doing the right thing to put these toxins on top of the water to make the oil go down?
So to answer the first question first about whether they're right to be drilling such deep wells, obviously there's demand for oil, and obviously that's they were permitted to do this by the EPA. However, I think maybe what we need to do, everybody in America needs to do, is to think if this is something we really want to be doing, because with such deep wells as we're seeing, it's incredibly difficult to cap them off if they do spring a leak or something goes wrong. So we probably need to think about the costs to our environment, you know, not only to just the animals that already live there and the plants that live there, but also to the people that enjoy the Gulf of Mexico and who rely on the Gulf of Mexico for their own livelihoods, the fishermen and people who are involved with the tourism industry. So it may not be the right thing for the Gulf of Mexico to have such deep wells, and that's something that I think we need to consider. As far as the second question about the dispersants that are being placed on some parts of the oil spill, it's been apparently done before on smaller spills on the surface where these things, chemicals have been put onto the oil in order to break it down into smaller parts, and then those smaller parts are digested by bacteria that live in the ocean naturally. However, a whole lot of dispersant is being placed onto the oil spill, and it's also being placed at the wellhead on the bottom of the floor where the leak is coming from, and that's never been done before. And the effects of the dispersants being used at that depth is not known. And the dispersants, as we've learned, can be toxic as well. And so the dispersants may simply add to the toxicity already that the oil has and make things worse. Particularly when you think about the ocean, you have to realize that there's a whole lot of sea life in the ocean. Just because it's not something that we see doesn't mean it's not there. There are baby bluefin tuna, there's crustaceans, all kinds of fish, and all of those things might be impacted by the dispersants. But what we don't know is how to what degree. So we're kind of doing a big experiment in the Gulf of Mexico with these dispersants. And usually when you do an experiment, you do it in a controlled situation in a lab, and you monitor things carefully to find out what the results are. And what we're doing right now is a big uncontrolled experiment, and it's going to be very difficult to know where those toxins are in the water column, where the currents take them. It's going to be really hard to track the effects of this. So we could potentially be doing more harm instead of helping the situation.
Yes, and I believe that the government is thinking that they're doing this right now, so they're thinking that it's now or never, so we have to do it right now.
Yeah, well, the big push is to keep the oil from reaching the coastline, and the coastline is where these marshes and mangroves are, and these are sort of complex ecosystems that are very sensitive, and so people are afraid that if the oil comes in a slick on the surface into these areas, it will destroy them for good. It will wipe out the marsh plants and the mangroves and ruin the coastline. And so what we may be doing with the dispersants is sacrificing sea life for coastal life, and that's, again, a question that nobody really knows the answer to.
So you're giving up one species for another?
Possibly. It's not really known, and we're going to have to continue monitoring. Something that's going to go on for years after this spill is environmental monitoring of the sediments, which is the soil or the sand or whatever is on the coastline or the seafloor, of the water, of probably the plants. Are they taking these toxins up into their roots and leaves, and also of wildlife.
Good. And a while back you told me that sea turtles could get this oil into their track and into their system. Mm-hmm. Tell me how they could do that.
Well, one of the things that sea turtles aren't very smart about is what is food and what isn't. I think a lot of people know that plastics, particularly plastic bags and balloons, are very harmful to sea turtles. Even if you release a balloon on land or throw a plastic bag on the side of a highway inland, it could end up being blown to the shoreline and end up in the ocean. And when a sea turtle sees a plastic bag, it thinks it's a jellyfish, and jellyfish is one of the things that a sea turtle eats. Similarly, we might have these tar balls, as they're called, and they would look kind of like a blob of jellyfish to a sea turtle, and they could eat them. And obviously that would be a more direct exposure to oil, eating oil rather than just swimming in it. And so that would be a big problem for sea turtles if they were to eat tar balls.
Thank you. It's been very nice to have you on our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.